treaty, and a whole lot of misunderstanding and misinformation about that as well. So we'll talk a little bit about that. It's funny, you know. So let's just briefly on the treaty. Whenever I talk about the treaty, what's most important for us is, first of all, the Te Reo version and what it says in the Te Reo version, because it's completely different to the other made-up version. And only the Te Reo version counts. And the thing for us is, what was the intentions of our tupuna? What was in their heart and mind by going through this process? And that's when we also start to get a better understanding of the document. And we know it as a covenant. So first of all, it was the Te Reo version that went around the country, right? And it was the Te Reo version that every whānau hapu discussed and conferenced about and wānangat about for weeks and days. And it was that intention and comprehension that they had. Now, in international law, the language of the country prevails, right? And their understanding and interpretation of that language. So that's just international law. When there's a treaty between two parties, the language of the time. There's another term called contra proferentum, which is it's not just the language of the one receiving, but it's actually about whoever receives it, the document. It's their comprehension of their language as well. So if there's two documents in English, well, it's the one who's receiving it that decides on the terms and the understanding and the comprehension. Yeah. So that's right. First in time, best in law. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. First in time, best in law, and that's we'll go in deeper a bit later on that. So we obviously didn't have signatures at the time, right? We didn't have surnames and that, but the tupuna put their symbol, right? And quite often these symbols were something that came from their tāmoko, either their nose or their chin, or right. So that's actually giving how people would recognise them, how other tangata whenua would recognise them. So, oh, yes, oh, that's that chief, you know, by their moko koa, like by their tāmoko. Okay. And there's a whole lot of significance to those as well, and those symbols. So that's why we see it as a covenant. It's not just of this world between two parties, but there's a whole spiritual world that is involved in this document. So, we've all been to Papa down in Wellington. Oh, this wonderful place of misinformation. Oh, sorry. Oh my goodness. Okay, so see, there it is. Right, that's Te Tiriti. And right next to this is that, which is totally fictitious. But that's two or three stories high, right? And they love putting this one up. And all I say is beware of that, and we'll go further into that. But that's what the government has been using for the last 180 years, and it's totally false. So here they have the real one, and what it says in Te Reo at the top with all the signatures.
How many signatures?
Ooh, well, across all of the copies, there's over 500. Over 500. Okay, so let's just understand why the confusion. First of all, the Te Reo version was on the 6th of February, over 500 signatures, about the articles. The articles are what's important. Our mana is retained, and it's the continuation of He Wakaputanga. What's the treaty? Well, it's English. It's the 11th of April. And what they use is a version because they went around all these different areas, and Waikato, they said, oh, here it is. All of the korero was in te reo. But the guy said, oh, sorry, I only brought the English version. Do you mind signing that? Well, that's why. Right? But that does not undermine the te reo version. It's just the 40 of Wakaputanga. Yeah, please.
I'm just going to put little plugs on too.
Great.
So it gives everybody a comprehension. But on the English version of the Treaty of Waitangi, i.e. the Treaty of Waitangi Act 1975, states that it was signed on the 6th of February. Is this true to you?
Well, that's right, because that's the one that counts. Hey, the 6th of February one, not the April one, right? So, okay, 11th, 40 signatures, the principles, right? So the government, this government, only ever talks about the principles, upholding the principles, because they don't want to acknowledge the articles. So they make up principles. They make up ideas about the treaty. The treaty in English says the British are sovereign, but really it's a permission contract for trade and commerce. That's all it is. It's a permission contract for trade and commerce. This is Dr. Henry. May he rest in peace. Just died recently, but great historian.
This implicit deceit is what's caused, is still a boil today.
Yes.
A festering sore. And so when Maori signed the treaty, my understanding is that the rangatira believed it to be an affirmation of he Wakaputanga and the relationship of the last 20 or 40 years with Britain. And basically like favoured, and there are some conventions in there. But the key part to the Te Tiriti Waitangi is in the preamble, not the articles.
Yes.
And in the preamble, in the Māori text in particular, because that was the only language being used at the time, te rongo me te atanoho are the two key phrases. And Queen Victoria is saying to the world, from her point of view, Māori are seeking peace and life as Māori would want it, and these will be guaranteed by Britain. So te rongo me te atanoho is an important phrase in the Tiriti o Waitangi.
Yes.
And basically it just affirms what's in he Wakaputanga.
Yes.
And in the flag and all the previous relationships. So from a Māori point of view, there's a continuity of thought.
Yes.
And Māori leaders in the 1850s, 1880s, 1890s and today, this is still the historical view of most informed Māori leaders.
Yes. Yes.
It's the settlers who have changed the understanding.
Because I understand that the Māori chiefs at the time, they signed the indigenous version, which the international community tends to side with, and in their belief they hadn't ceded autonomy. They had merely reiterated what the declaration had said.
Yes.
Would you say that?
Yes. And so the declaration is a one language document.
Yes.
The treaty, especially the Māori text, is consistent with he Wakaputanga.
Yes.
It's the English language treaties that are problematic. But Māori did not sign the English language texts.
No.
So 500 odd signed the Māori text to Tiriti o Waitangi, and another 40 signed an English text, and that's at Port Waikato. And they signed it in English simply because Captain Bunbury had forgotten to somehow or other to take the Māori text to Port Waikato for the signings.
Yes.
And so he used an English language text.
Yes.
The subtlety of this mistake is important because what I do know is that all the discussion in Port Waikato at the time was in Māori, and there is no evidence that they were speaking about the Te Tiriti Waitangi in English. And so while they signed in good faith an English version of the treaty, all the kōrero, all the talk was about the Māori text. And so you've got to, people mistakenly think that because they signed the English text, they were signing the English version. They weren't. And it was just a formality putting their moko marks on it. And this has led to a lot of confusion.
Yes.
And some of it accidental confusion, a lot of it's, in my mind, a deliberately misinterpretation of the history to justify settler colonialism later.
Yes, yes.
And so the International Convention today, followed by the Waitangi Tribunal and the New Zealand courts, are that where you have a treaty in two languages, as is the Treaty of Waitangi, they sit side by side.
Yes.
That on moments of dispute and where there's a lack of clarity, then precedence is given to the local language.
Okay, so I hope that helps you to get a comprehension from our perspective, is that this is not a new story. This is something that has been close to our hearts for 180 odd years and has been passed down from generation to generation to generation to say, hey, eventually we've got to have this put right. Right? The government is only just catching up. And it looks like the government is just chucking everything at Māori. That's another story, right? And I don't agree with that, but that's how that's happening either. Because it's mistelling a story again, right? It's creating division where it shouldn't be. But it's also important to know that, you know, we know the truth, we comprehend it, and it has been kept alive from generation to generation, right? From Whina Cooper doing the walk all the way down to Wellington, you know, different people have kept it alive. But each generation is incumbent upon them to step up. So that's why we're here, keep it alive and to get it out there. But it should be comforting to know that despite this knowledge, we're not interested in chaos. And ultimately our aroha and our values are going to make the difference here. It's not going to be a South Africa. It's not going to be an island. It will be under tikanga that this transformation happens. That's Dr. Moana Jackson. May he rest in peace as well, a great advocate for constitutional change. But again, it's telling their perspective. Let's just understand this. This is the coat of arms. And early on, the government used to say, look, you're equal. Right, the rangatira on one side and a lady in a white dress. Not without a crown. So why is that equal? This is our rangatira. This with the huia feather. And when you understand, comprehend the visuals, the authority is that, because that's above our rangatiras. Right? Yeah. Right, so, and yeah, this is just a lady in a white dress. It's not the Queen of England. And indeed, this is the crown, but what crown? Well, that's a whole other story, eh?